How you
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Is this a podcast of like craft?
It is.
Yeah.
Filmmaking
Great.
podcast. So
Great.
we're all filmmakers who do it, and we just have fun and chat to wonderful people like yourself
great.
about
Cool.
how they make their films.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Cool.
It's a good new perspective on this.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was at the premiere
Oh, you were last night. Oh, nice.
and I cannot believe the joy, the excitement in the room.
Isn't that fun?
It was unbelievable. I've never been in a premiere where the roof nearly came off, and this was after the first number.
I know, it's pretty fun. I had, this is the first premiere that I've gone to for this movie because I had a baby at the
That's
last
right.
one and I couldn't go there. So yeah, there's something, when you're in the edit room and it feels very lonely and you're making choices and you're like, do people really care about this choice or that choice? But you care so much, and so you try your best, but you never know what people think. And I've had plenty of experiences where things surprise me and here's and that. So to feel the actual joy and felt like people were paying attention to the details that we were paying attention to, it means the world to me, and it just encourages me, like, those choices, those do matter, and spending the time to think of it does matter. So.
Yeah, and it did. It came across that way. All those little moments, the little cutaways, all those little asides that we loved. The audience loved it.
Yes, of course.
Mark Platt, the producer at the premiere, was saying, how he'd always wanted to make this a film, even when it was the book, and then they did the stage show of it, and how he wanted to find the right director, and the time wasn't right. What did you do to make the time right? What did you pitch? Was it, did you come in with mood boards? I know you'd seen the show as well when it was off Broadway.
Yeah.
So it was in your heart.
It was in my heart, for sure.
But what did you pitch? How did you win it?
Yeah. Well, I got, so one, I'm a fan. I saw the show before it was ever on Broadway. And I remember, and I was going to film school at the time, so I was learning how to pull the levers of cinema at that time, and so it was fresh on my mind. And watching the show, I remember it blowing my mind, and I remember seeing some of the architecture in it, seeing when you come into the show and the balloon, the bubble comes down, and it brings you right back to the moment in Wizard of Oz and Munchkinland, and I remember her flying around and the silhouette of the Wicked Witch of the West. So I remember what they were doing on stage, and I pictured it in my mind as if it was a movie. I was like, this is the most cinematic show I've ever seen. And I think, I can't wait for someone to make this. It's going to be great. And 20 years later, every few years, I'm like, is anyone making this movie? Because this needs to be made. So I had that sort of patient zero experience before. I didn't know anything about going in, and that I kept dear in me. And I remember thinking about I had spent 10 years making movies of sequels and things, and some with dance, some with movement, some with action, some with lyrics, some with just music, and some that I learned how to work with actors and how to hone that. So I feel like I grew up in front of the studios in a weird way, and the audience, as I started to understand how to work with crews, how to get your vision from your head to the page, to the screen. And so coming into Wicked, I felt like I had hit my 10,000 hours. I had felt like I've gone through the Crazy Rich Asian experience and the In the Heights experience of learning that what I had to say was valuable and unique, and coming into a world where, whether it's representation or whether it's culture or whether it's just re-looking at the stories that we're told, cinema was a great medium, maybe the only medium that could really impact those things at global levels. And so when you take a thing like Wicked, and it already has a global audience, and it just, you rise to the occasion at that moment. And I got the call.
Yeah, he called you.
Yes, so Mark Platt called me. Well, actually, it's a kind of a long story, but I'll give the short version of,
Okay.
I had been calling Universal and Mark Platt for 10 years, saying, I'm here, I know how to make this movie. And they never called me back.
Yeah.
And but having done Crazy Rich Asians, I got a little bit more, a little more muscle in me, and they didn't call me then. During In the Heights is when they called me, because it was my first musical, and I think they saw how we translated that and how we brought it to life. First of all, Universal wasn't letting anyone send me a script for a certain period of time, and we're like, why? And they're like, we can't say anything yet because something's coming down, but we're like, well, does it rhyme with picked? And they finally they called me officially, and that was Mark Platt, and he said, okay, we're looking to do this. What's your sense of it? And we didn't even talk about really the movie. We talked about the fairy tale. We talked about and this was during COVID and the lockdown, that what was happening at this moment was the storyteller had been revealed, that it wasn't this all-powerful thing, that maybe we're just human, and maybe that yellow brick road that we're told to walk on isn't made for everybody, and maybe there's another path. And how do you, when the truth gets revealed, who are we going to be now? Who do you become? And this story sort of reflects that in a fairy tale way and kicks the tires on that. So I love the re-exploration of the American fairy tale and using even movies, American movies, of like driving in the 80s into a high school, and a John Hughes movie was like riding into Shiz, and 2001 of the turning wheel in the library, or E.T. as she takes off into the sky. So it's re-examining these stories that we've been told in a new way with a character that defies some of those things that we've set. So that sort of was the starting point of, we can do this. This is actually urgently needs to be made now. There's no choice but to make this right now.
And that's great, and it's so nice to hear you're passionate about that, because when you're pitching to make a movie, that has to come across. It has to be, you have to want to do it, and you clearly did.
Yeah.
And your journey from In the Heights to this, you can see why, Mark wanted you. Let's talk about the directing side of it. Let's talk about you now. You've done the pitch, you've got the job.
Yeah.
Which is also daunting as well as wonderful.
Yeah.
How did you then go, okay, what's my plan for this? How am I going to make it bigger than the stage show, or however you thought like that, to really hone what is quite an incredible film?
Yeah, it wasn't all at once. It was stages of, I did a period of, I reread the text of The Wizard of Oz to understand L. Frank Baum. I mean, Elphaba is named after L. Frank Baum, Elphaba. And they do so many nods in the show, whether it's like musical nods to the movie or to the Denslow drawings. And so there was inspiration sort of built in that I was sniffing around. But I really wanted to understand their journey, because I hadn't been on that 20-year journey. And I always will know where my perspective is, but I needed to absorb Stephen Schwartz, Winnie Holtzman, who wrote the book and was writing the script, and Mark Platt. And so we did these sessions with Dana Fox, who was coming on to help me put some words in there too. And I just listened for months and months, 4 hours, 5 hours a day, 5 days a week, committed to a routine of going line by line of every script that was ever written, every lyric that he had ever written, why, for Wicked, why those were the words he chose, maybe other versions, what scenes were cut and why, for time, for this or that, why that song got put in. And I just listened and I just absorbed. And that was really important on a couple fronts. One, I needed the information. But two, I wanted to understand their intention from the very beginning of what Wicked meant to them and how they tried to attempt to do that with the tools that they had in theater, so that I could see if I had better tools to use in the cinematic form to express those things, even if it's coming into Munchkinland at the beginning. And it feels sort of dystopian in the show, dark, and you don't get the delight of coming into Munchkinland. And that's something that Stephen Schwartz said, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. This is a celebration. This is a Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead celebration, and we can do that. We can have a land of tulips. We planted 9 million tulips, and we can create a culture of Munchkinland people that are celebrating. And yes, that celebration gets dark because their celebration is in the hatred of this villain that they think is a villain. But we can do that by both creating a geographical location and creating a culture there and costumes and a people. So it's those kind of things that I think really helped give detail to the intention. And then what I would do in those sessions, I'd ask certain questions that I knew, that I thought already instinctually we needed to answer in this movie in order to make it, give an audience to make sense while watching the movie.
Okay,
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And then when you're on set, once you've got everything in your head and everyone's sort of agreed on everything, if you like, and then you've made it your own. What happens when you're on set and in those moments? Obviously you've probably storyboarded it with an inch of its life as well, perhaps.
Yeah.
But maybe you're free as well. Talk us through, like, when you're on set, maybe a scene where you went, let's try something different.
Well, I'm a big process person. Like, I like to do all the research. I like to, and it's not just me and I work with Alice Brooks, our DP. I work with our production designer, Nathan Crowley, our costume designer, Paul Taswell, our choreographer, Chris Scott. And I try to express, again, on this sort of wall of emotion of each scene, what we're trying to do. Yearning, okay, and we're in yearning, and for instance, Wizard and I, and okay, what would she be wearing? Okay, she's young, so yearning, you're dreaming. Okay, so I don't know what to tell you, Paul, of how to dress her, but this is early days, so she dresses her in the simple, beautiful black dress that she's dressing in, and okay, and we want her to, if this is about elevation, it's about ascendance, the possibilities. So, okay, at the beginning, we're going to start where the music isn't even there. She's just, did that really just happen? Did I actually? And during the orchestrations, we'd pull back on the intro of it and just let's record it live and let her ease us into it. Okay, so then where are we going to do this? Well, in Shiz, we're saying that there's this bottom area that's almost lower than the ground. It's actually lower than the ground. It's right to the tip of the water, but she's never going to touch the water because we avoid all those things. And in there, she needs a connection to nature. Okay, so if there's a connection to nature, what can we have? We can have frogs because they're green and they don't fly, but they jump. Okay, so that's like the beginning of our hints of what she can do. And then she goes in there and there's a cricket. She goes to the next area and there's a cricket that comes to her. So as all the Aussians run away from her, nature comes towards her. So she has this connection. So we're establishing stuff of her character that we don't have in dialogue. And okay, and the cricket takes off because it has wings. It can actually like go further in flight. Okay, and then when she goes on, the bees come towards her. And as she goes on, the light reflects against her and she comes out and the butterflies are coming out of the field. So now we've got to build a field. Okay, and we've got to have VFX do these butterflies, and we're going to have a cliff. VFX, what can you do? We can build a giant cliff, but you build as much as you can physically. So we're all sort of forming this, so she can run until she finally gets, and we show a little bit of leap, so that in defying gravity, that it doesn't come out of nowhere, because that always bugged me, that like you can't just come up with a power.
Yeah.
So we establish that she has this relationship with gravity, and she has this possibility of leaping. And she gets to the edge, and you think she could maybe leap up, but she's not ready yet. And there's a rainbow, and the blue birds fly over the rainbow. So to me, that kind of set piece came organically about working with my crew, but story first, about what do we need to communicate about this girl's yearning of going somewhere that she's not ready to go yet. So by the time Defying Gravity comes around, when she gets to that edge, she's ready to jump. And even in that scene, when she jumps, is she able to jump, or is she not ready yet?
Yeah, and it was such a great moment.
Yeah.
And I love that you put that in at the beginning. It's one of those, isn't it, the callback as well,
Yes.
which we all need as filmmakers.
Yes.
And finally then working with crew, when you're on set.
Yes.
Everything's set up, you've worked, your costume's ready,
yes,
everything's ready. What about those moments when, you're with your DP and you're with your best boy in Sparks?
Yeah.
What do you like to do? A bit of advice here, I suppose, for aspiring filmmakers.
Well, I love the fact that we don't know what's going to happen that day. To me, we have to plan a lot for a movie like this, but we plan as much, but we're never precious of it. We can get to that day, and everybody knows. Choreography knows, actors know. I could turn this whole set around if it feels like something is happening that we didn't plan. To me, it is those moments that are what make cinema great. Because if you can think about it in your bedroom and write it down in a keyboard while you're at the library, or be in a meeting and come up with it, it's not good enough. It's like the magic of shooting is you have to shoot it. Or you might as well animate it and be done with it. Like, it has to be something that you could have never thought of, or on paper feels ridiculous. And so that process to me on set, we always say, you try to make your movie, write your movie, set your movie, but at some point your movie speaks back to you. And you better be listening, because if you can listen to it and you lean into it, that's where the special stuff, that's always when I'm making a movie, that's what everybody talks about after. Oh, that moment when Elphaba winks at her when she's putting on. If that was in a script, you would laugh at it. She winks at her. In fact, an actor couldn't even act that. But it happened because she was in the moment, and she was looking at Glinda, and I could tell she wanted Glinda to know she was going to be okay. And she couldn't use a word, so she just winked at her. And it's those moments that you're like, that is iconic and will stay there forever. And I think that's my thing, is that's when filmmaking is really happening, is when you're in the moment and you're chasing butterflies and putting it in jars.
That's beautiful. Jon M Chu, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Marvellous. Thanks, Jon. That was great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jon.
What's the podcast I want to listen to?